Now, I know this is a little bit different video as to what I normally post on this channel, but I do think it is necessary to make because it affects my content. It'll probably affect a bunch of other people's content, and it has been for the past 8 months to a year is what I'd say. So basically why I'm making this video is because a couple of days ago CypherPK posted a video called Why Fortnite YouTubers Quit, and I thought it was really good, and I thought it would be very important to elaborate on that video because I do think he missed out on some very important points that would also have a great effect on content in general. Now, if you want a starting base to go and watch before you watch this video, I'll leave the original video link in the description so you can go and check that out and get some more context before you watch this video. So if you haven't already, go and watch that before you watch this because it'll put a lot more context into what I'm about to say. Now, a couple months ago, I posted a video like this where I explained a lot of things that I'm about to explain here, so if you don't feel like watching that, basically that video, I'm going to sum it up into 3 main points. 1 being changes to the game, 2 being map, and 3 being weapons. Now basically, to sum up that video and to not waste much of your time, basically I was saying that the changes to the game have not been much, and I think that we were all complaining that Chapter 2 did not have very many changes, and it didn't, but is still infinitely better than Chapter 3 because of these next 2 things. Now, next one being the map. I do think that Chapter 3 is a good map for no building. I don't see no building being played on the Chapter 2 map. However, I also don't see Chapter 3's map being played on as building. I think that the Chapter 2 map is a lot superior to that. And the third and probably most important thing is weapons meta. Now, I do think the Chapter 3 guns are very good for no building. However, I do think that the Chapter 2 guns are better for building. And if you mix those 2 things up, it does not end well because I think that the Chapter 2 guns are meant for building and not no building. And I think that the Chapter 3 guns are meant for no building, not building. And if you've played both chapters, you will know that there is a huge difference in how the game plays out. Now, I don't know why he didn't discuss this in his original video. Maybe we just make different kinds of content. And I know our playstyles are completely different, and what we've been doing with the game is also completely different, so this is a different perspective on that. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up these 3 things is because it affects me probably more than anybody else, just because of the way that I play the game and how I make my content and what I do with my content. At least in my experience, I have not seen it affect other content creators as much as it affects me, so that's why I'm pointing out these 3 things. Also, I will be referencing them heavily later on in the video, so get ready for that. The first point he made in that video was viewership, and I do think that the points he brought up are very valid and relevant. Like he has said, I do think that your videos will differ greatly in viewership depending on how you market them, what is in them, and what content is in the video in terms of a category. Now, I know Fortnite viewership has been on the decline for a long time, but I do think it can be brought back up to good levels like it was in Chapter 2, because I know the viewership dropped heavily towards the end of the chapter and picked up heavily towards the beginning of this chapter, but it has also fallen off almost as fast as it has this chapter as it did last chapter. And the only reason why it hasn't almost completely gone back to the same level is because of no building, which I do think is a really great game mode to add. Which, if there are more content creators, there's a higher chance that people will go into the game themselves and like the game, because if they see someone that they like playing it, they might try it out for themselves. So there's the viewership uptick, because if more people are playing the no building and are attracted to the new game modes that Fortnite has been putting out, that's just going to mean more overall viewership for the game and its category. Now, next thing he talks about is motivation and burnout. I'm just going to be combining the 2 into one little category to make things go faster. But basically, as of recently, or as of Chapter 3, I haven't been feeling as motivated to make Fortnite content. It's still there, just because it's what I like to do, but it is not as much as it used to be in Chapter 2, and that once again goes back to the 3 reasons that I pointed out at the beginning of the video. I do think making Fortnite content is also not as rewarding now because of the lower views, just because of the lower interest there is in the game as compared to some other parts in the game's history. I have not daily uploaded much, and when I have, it was when my content style was a little bit differently, but it still did take a lot of effort to daily upload, and I'd imagine doing that for 2 or 3 years would be more than enough to cause a burnout. Now, since there's less motivation to play the game, you'd also get burnt out way easier because you aren't as motivated to play the game. So those two things go hand in hand, and if one's not good, then the other one isn't going to be good. Now, while we're on the topic of content and content style differences, I do think it is fair to point out that I do completely different content than most of these Fortnite creators. And I know a lot of big creators have editors, so they just do the recording and that's it. So they can go for longer periods of time without getting demotivated, because the editing process is probably the most time consuming part of it, which it also happens to be probably my favorite part of it. Now, I think my content is a lot more motivation dependent than some of the other creators out there, just because of what I choose to do. Now, what I choose to do is I spend a lot of time editing, a couple hours recording, then it'll take like, I don't know, a day or something to export the file all the way and upload it to YouTube just because of the high recording quality. Then I'll just put together a thumbnail that I think is so stupid you can't help but click on it, and that strategy has worked out a little bit, but honestly, I don't feel like spending a lot of time on thumbnails, and I probably should, and I might start doing that in the future. Now, since we're on the topic of differences, I would like to point out the differences between Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. As I've said before, it just doesn't feel the same to be playing it. Like, you can watch some of my older videos, I'll just be full piecing everybody in one pump after one pump, and I still do that now, and I'm way better now than I am in Chapter 2, but it just doesn't feel as smooth as it did in Chapter 2, and that's because of, differences in the game. And I also feel watching the game was a lot more entertaining back then, because honestly, I remember when Faceway was streaming every single day, I'd watch for hours as he destroys absolutely everybody he comes across in any game mode, and I thought that was probably some of the most entertaining stuff I've ever watched. And his gameplay is also in the background of this video, so if you're wondering whose hand cam that is, then now you know. I know the content felt good to watch, and it probably felt good to play, because I know when I played the game, I thought that Chapter 2 just, felt a lot better. I've said it a million times already. Now, the next topic he brings up is personal life. Now, I do think this is very content and individual dependent. So, like, if I spend a lot of time on my videos, editing them, recording them, like, that's not going to leave much time for anything else. But if you only record and you have an editor, then that leaves a lot more time for other things. So if you do everything yourself, or if you have somebody else edit your videos for you and export them, then that really just makes a big difference in your personal life. And it also comes down to a lot of motivation. And I do think that motivation and burnout can affect your personal life too, because if you're spending almost all day, every day, making YouTube videos, editing them, recording them, that doesn't really leave much time for anything else, and if you're demotivated to do that, and that's all you do, then, it'll go into other areas of your life if you're not careful. So yeah, basically, personal life comes down to what content you do, how much time it takes up, and your motivation. Those three things are probably all intertwined. Now, topics 4 and 5 are viewership and time, and I feel like I've already discussed those pretty thoroughly throughout this video, so I'll just give you a short overview of what they are. So basically, in recap, time depends on your content and personal life, because it can affect those two areas, and motivation is connected to burnout, like I said at the very beginning of the video. Now, I know you hear me talk a lot about how Chapter 2 is better than Chapter 3 and all that, and what I'm trying to point out here is that the aspects of Chapter 2 were a lot better than the aspects of Chapter 3, and that they failed to implement those into the next chapter. I'm not saying that it has to be titled Chapter 2 Season 9 for it to be good. It really doesn't. It just has to be those main aspects of the game to make better content and to make the content more entertaining. Because I do feel like a lot of content creators feel that Chapter 3 is sort of underwhelming compared to Chapter 2. At least that's what I think, but I cannot... Now, if you have reached the end of this rant, or whatever you could call it, and have not watched the original video, then I highly encourage you to go and do that, because it will provide a lot more information and context to the making of this video. Now, I know you've heard me rant on about how Chapter 2 will never be as good as Chapter 3, and I'm not saying it's because it was Chapter 2, I'm saying it was because of the features that were in Chapter 2 that were failed to be implemented in Chapter 3 that makes Chapter 3 bad and Chapter 2 good. So, in case you didn't understand that, basically I'm saying it's the features in Chapter 2, not the actual title and the memories from it. And I do think if they implemented that in Chapter 3, it would be all good. But anyway, thank you for watching.